When was the last time that you actively went out to meet a stranger? To expand your perspective, to truly listen to and engage with other people. That's exactly what I talked to about this week with my guest, Alex Waters, who set himself the challenge of having 100 coffees with 100 strangers throughout the year of 2020. Alex talks and shares about his journey throughout the challenge. He talks about how it brought a new sense of humility to him, how he learned to receive feedback, how he really zoned in on his own listening, and talked about the importance of human connection, as well as just undertaking a challenge for no other reason than you feel called to. Alex gets really raw and candid in this, which makes it a fantastic conversation, but it's also fun and engaging too, and hopefully it might just inspire you to go out and meet strangers and expand your own perspective. So enjoy Alex. Hello and welcome back to WA Real. I'm your host, Bryn Edwards. Today I have the great pleasure of welcoming Alex Waters. Alex, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
So we're going to talk to each other about meeting people.
Yeah.
And your little project, which was 100 coffees.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about, at a high level, for those who don't know, because I was one of the 100 coffees, and
Yeah.
we'll come to that later, what was 100 coffees?
Yeah, 100 coffees was a challenge I set myself at the back end of 2019 to meet 100 strangers, or to have 100 coffees with 100 strangers.
Yes.
And the reason why I challenged myself to do that was that, we're both in Perth, and I'd been really living out of Perth. I grew up here, but I'd been out of Perth since I was 21.
Yeah.
And I'm now 30. So, majority of my 20s away from Perth, came back here, was living here, realized I just didn't really know anyone, had
Yes.
business interests based elsewhere, so I wasn't even really doing business here. And the idea or the thought of sort of going to networking events where people are throwing business cards at each other as quickly as they can, and
Yeah.
you never really talk to them, and people just pitching their business at you,
Yeah.
didn't interest me. I was at a stage where I wanted to meet and connect with people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of important, isn't it? That connect part.
Yeah.
Because you can go to a networking event and come home with 20 business cards and have 20 good conversations.
Exactly.
But are they then going to lead anything in terms of a real human connection?
Yeah, and that was my objective. It was human
Yeah.
connection or friendship or whatever. It wasn't, I want to do this so I can grow my network and then build my business.
Yes.
Or so that I can do this and, grow a personal brand. It was nothing like that. It was just,
Yes.
I just wanted to meet more people and,
Yes.
and connect with them.
And that's what I really liked about it so it was Beth and Wynn
Yes.
who connected us to come and have a coffee together.
Yeah.
So we were general strangers before we met. But when she first told me about it, that's one of the things that I was really drawn to, because I guess for me, a lot of people think that this podcast is like the front end of a business, or
Yeah.
this, that, and the other. And a lot of people are surprised to realize it's not.
Yeah.
And when I did a recent podcast with Nick Hayes at Media Stable, and I said to him, I don't make any money out of doing this. I think I've had a crystal, a loaf of bread, a pair of socks, invited to a few, but I have a network of people. I have a whole lot of new friends. My perspective has just gone with my expansion. So, yeah, was that similar for you at the start?
Yeah. I mean, to give people a bit of a backstory of me, I had been back in Perth for about 18 months, 2 years when I set the challenge. But, one of those years, when I say back, I'd maintained a residence here, but
Yes.
I'd been traveling the world. And then the next year I'd sort of had a baby and, was in a relationship. And that relationship broke down. And, I kind of found myself in this place of, what the fuck do I do now?
Yes.
Like I thought I had everything I ever wanted.
Yes.
I don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm actually really lost. Like I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I kind of had the luxury of not really having to work, at that time. And So that's what,
Yeah.
you know, I was just like, well, you know, I'd love to have more friends. And, yeah.
And I think it's at those moments, because I didn't quite twig that with you, but
Yeah.
I myself having a 12-year relationship breakdown here in Perth. All my friends were made through my daughter's mother, who had the network, etc., etc. And all of a sudden I realised I don't have any friends and I don't have any family.
Yeah.
And for me, it was a day of signing who my next of kin was on the document and putting my dad down with a UK phone number. And they went, no, we need someone in Australia. And I was like, I'm snookered here. So that's when you think, right, I've got to actually do something.
Yeah, pretty much.
So where did the actual
I don't know if
genesis of the idea?
Yeah, well, I don't know if mine was that drastic, but I do recall having to do something like that. And mine was like, you know, someone in a different state or a friend, like one of my best friends who I've grown up with. But the idea came from, funnily enough, through my ex. And so it's not an original idea. And after I started, I actually, you know, Googled it, and there's this guy who has sort of done a TED talk on his own journey with that as well, over in Victoria. But I had just, when we were together, we met someone who came around to our house, and she knew her because she'd had a coffee with her boyfriend, and he had been doing 100 coffees years ago.
Right.
And so the idea had kind of been sitting there for me for a couple of years.
Yes.
And it just popped back into my head at this point, and I was like, you know, I'll just challenge myself to have 100 coffees with 100 strangers.
Yeah.
And like,
was it one of those things that just like,
yeah, it just
that's
kind of,
me. I've
exactly.
got to do this.
Yeah. It just dropped in, and I made a social media post about it that day, and I was on TikTok at the time, so I did a TikTok, and which is funny.
You're a youngster, you.
Yeah. I don't have it on anymore, but and I posted on LinkedIn and Instagram and asked, you know, for friends to recommend anyone who I might not know to me, and it just spread from there. A couple of people reached out on LinkedIn, and then I posted each coffee that I had, and you know, more people would comment, and I'd reach out to them.
Yeah, it starts to get a life of its own.
Exactly.
So, what was it like with the first couple of coffees? Nerve-wracking, exciting?
Yeah, I was nervous and excited about it. You know, actually the first coffee was a guy named Miles, and he coincidentally had just reached out to me on LinkedIn randomly that day before I'd posted anything. Because he'd wanted to connect with some entrepreneurs in Perth, and he was a student at, I think, Curtin Uni.
Yeah.
And I was like, great, I have just set this challenge for myself. You're going to be my first coffee.
Yeah.
That works for me, works for you. You know, can we catch up this weekend? And we did it at Yellow Cafe in Trig. I think I was really surprised at how seamless it was.
Yes.
At like just two strangers just catching up, and by the end of it, it felt like, you know, we'd gotten to know each other somewhat, and that there was actually a real connection there as well.
Yes.
So, and I think within my first 20, there was one or two that were, probably one that was more like someone wanted to have a coffee with me and they kind of pitched me.
Right.
On their business.
Yeah.
But I learned how to kind of spot those.
Yes.
But yeah, I'd set myself a few rules. There had to be a stranger.
Yes.
It had to be a stranger. I couldn't say no if someone reached out and asked me for a coffee. I had to put aside my bias to connect with anyone. So it wasn't, you know, this kind of like, oh, let's see how many important people I can have coffee with. It was like, you know, just anyone who sort of pops up in my sphere.
Yeah.
And I always attempted to start by listening, because people would always ask me about me, but I would, you know, the whole I didn't want to sit there and talk about myself
No.
for 100 hours or 100 coffees.
100 times doing the introduction. Really.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
Is, I'm Alex.
Yeah. So those are kind of my rules, and it just flowed on from there.
So, I guess one of the things. So I'm quite drawn to what's called meta-analysis, whenever I have someone who's met a lot of people or coached a lot of people or worked with a lot of people or done a lot of things, I like to ask what they see across, not just individually. So I guess let's start outside. What did you learn about other people in general from doing this?
Yeah, I think that, I was reflecting on this, and, in some ways, as much as I met 100 different people, I kind of met the same sort of people in a loose way.
Yes.
Because people who say yes to something generally have similar characteristics in the way that they might be approaching life. And I think that was what a lot of it was, that they either said yes to me randomly messaging them on LinkedIn because they were a connection of a connection, or they reached out to me after I put up a post saying, hey, would you, if anyone else wants to have a coffee, or someone recommended them, like in our case. So I noticed that those people generally tend to have a positive outlook on life. And tended to have a level of humility about them, which was, I'm going to go and meet a complete stranger and just connect.
Yes.
I think just generally, more open to opportunities or the possibility of the unknown.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Did you find that? Okay, I like your almost caveat that most people will say yes. Did you find it almost somewhat reassuring in human spirit that we're a lot more similar than we think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. Yeah, it was one of those things of like, we do so much unconsciously to separate ourselves, but actually we are. We're all the same at the root of it all. And I had these moments with some coffees. Actually, there was one in particular that stands out, and she was an older lady, like maybe older's the wrong word, but I still, in my mind, I'm still like 21, right?
Yeah.
I forget that I'm 30, and then sometimes I look around at other 30-year-olds, and I'm like, I thought you were way older than me, but I forget how I look. So anyway, she was probably maybe 60. And she reached out to me after I, posted about it on LinkedIn. It was maybe around, the midway mark. And I remember going to it and thinking, fuck, what are we going to have in common? Like,
yes,
how's this really going to go? Is this going to be a hard coffee to get through or something like that? And it ended up being one of the best ones I'd had.
Yes.
I just think like the ability to relate to someone else doesn't mean you have to have had the same experience as them or anything like that. And the differences in our life experiences and perspectives actually made it so much more interesting. But we did see a lot of the things the same way and shared a lot of the the same values. And she was just incredibly lighthearted and funny, and I just sat there laughing the whole time. Like it was a really great conversation. And that helped me throw a lot. Like I think I already had been working on this unconsciously, but at that point I was like, oh, you have so many biases controlling your decisions.
Yes.
And most of the time they're bullshit.
Yeah.
So
Well, that takes me to my next question. What did you learn about yourself during this? How did you change and morph during it?
Yeah.
Because I just know from all the conversations I've had doing this that I'm always different at the end of a conversation, let alone 10 or 100. So
yeah, I know you've recorded some interviews with about narcissism and stuff like that, and I actually think I had a number of like narcissistic traits, probably I probably still do, but like more prominent back then than I do now. Like my pattern in life has been to alienate myself from people, because as a child I didn't feel loved or accepted, and so it's to alienate myself from people so that I don't have to deal with that question of whether they do love me or accept me. So you're not loved and you don't have to worry about being accepted. And it's not necessarily conscious. Like as an adult, I'm not like, oh fuck, I'm just going to push everyone away because I don't want to have to deal with this. But it's just an unconscious thing that plays out, and by the time you know it, you're like, oh fuck, But that's how I feel like at 20.
I've done it again.
Exactly. Like at 28, 29, I think, which is when I started this. I really didn't have a great circle of friends around me. I had some interstate and that thing, but not heaps.
Yeah.
It's like, you'd think kind of after that time, you would have collected at least some friendships along the way. And so for me, I was really challenging myself to go outside my comfort zone here.
Yes.
And I think that would be surprising for people who have known me for a longer period of time.
Right.
Because I'm an entrepreneur. I've owned several businesses. I used to auction, property in front of people as a real estate agent. I've done huge charity auctions in front of big audiences. So I've never been afraid to put myself out there in that way. But when it comes to connecting and being open and what feels like vulnerable.
So it's easy to play the role and do the thing.
Exactly.
Than be Alex.
Yeah, especially because the purpose of playing the role and do the thing was so that I could be more accepted.
Yeah.
Right? Funny how our minds work. But
isn't it? Or subconsciousness.
Yeah. So it was really me putting myself outside my comfort zone. And I think I really developed a level of humility throughout the process, because I had to override so many of my defaults, which would be to talk about me because it's more comfortable, or to talk about a projected version of me.
Yes.
Than actually sit there and allow someone to ask questions about me and answer honestly. And like I said about my biases, I really think I had this hierarchy of how I viewed people and where they sat on my level of importance.
So it's like your judgment hierarchy.
Yeah, it's a judgment hierarchy. Yeah. I was judgmental, but not in a overt like, oh, you're wearing a blue shirt. You mean, look at you. Not like
that's not how I would do it.
No.
I'm just doing this and that. Yeah.
Not like in that way, but judgmental as in, well, who deserves my time?
Right.
Heading into it. And obviously that was one of the reasons I set the rule up, which was, I can't say no to anyone if they ask me to have a coffee with them, and whoever presents themselves, I will have coffee with.
Yes.
So it completely obliterated all of that because, as I said, one of the single coffee I was judging the most was probably one of my best. And to go through something like that is humbling. Yeah. It's humbling for your ego and for yourself. It takes what?
It takes edges off you.
It does. Yeah. And it kind of, for me, it was kind of like, why have I been doing this to myself all my life?
Yeah.
And, to fast forward a bit, obviously I threw a party at the end, and that was great. And I did get emotional speaking, because I was like, I didn't expect for this to be how it's turned out.
Yeah.
And it's helped me change so much about myself. And generally, I'm a more happy person because of it.
Yeah. You're more settled within yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. More settled, more grounded. There's been a lot of other things go on that have contributed to that. But this is kind of in this this journey that's sort of taken me there and started me there. So
I think something that just came up, something I've been thinking about for a while, but something that really came up strongly when I was listening to you there is, we grow up and we might have brothers and sisters and stuff like that, and then we go to school and we're sort of constantly in this close environment, and school can be pretty brutal. When you're all out on the playground, if I think you're a dick, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Or you get punched or something like that, depending on the sort of school you go to. But you get a lot of feedback, and it's direct and it's real, and it's people's visceral response and stuff like that. You get a lot of that feedback, and then as we go out into the adult world, particularly now in a very politically correct world, we get less and less and less of that. So that then, in a strange kind of way, this is how I visualize it, that in a strange kind of way then means that we end up going on this very isolated, lonely path where even those closest to you won't tell you things because they don't want to upset you, or they don't want to be in an awkward situation, or they don't want to say it because, let's just arbitrarily say, you see someone putting on weight, but you don't want to say anything because that triggers the fact that you've got to recognize that you're putting on weight and you don't want to think about that yourself. So there's all this sort of stuff going on, right? Which, and I almost call them not conflict, but collisions, just people doing that. And we grow up in such a rich environment to that, and then it doesn't really happen. And so, as we become adults, we start to develop views on the world and how we do the world and how we make sense of the world and sense of our own sense, etc., etc. It's not until you actively put yourself out there do you continue that process of refining and developing that. Hanging out with your comfortable mates talking about the same shit is not going to do that. Yeah, it's great. It's like putting on your comfiest t-shirt when you really need it. And that has its place. But there's also a place of putting yourself into I now look at it in terms of put yourself into the furnace of, do my ideas really stack up against, the onslaught of other people's ideas and rubbing against it. And so, as you were saying, some of your biases and your judgment hierarchy and stuff like that's getting real-time direct feedback. Like you're sitting there judging the shit out of someone before you turn up, and then you sit there and you go, this is a fucking awesome conversation. And I get it all the time with the podcast. Even now I'll be like, see where this conversation goes, like sometimes, and it's usually after I've had an epic conversation with someone in the week before, and then the next week it's like, will that live up to the expectation of last week?
So this one's good because you've had a bit of a break over Christmas.
They're all good. Yeah. But as I was going to say, once you get actually into the conversation, you realise they're all good. Yeah. They all have their place. They're all serving you. And it's not necessarily the way you mentally want it to. Yeah. It's where you need it in a bigger way. That's bigger than just how your mind can see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we constantly typically go about our life, if we're not aware, controlling everything around us and our environment and our circumstances. And if you put that into a project like 100 Coffees or a podcast, you end up controlling the narrative of the interview, or trying to control the way that the conversation might go by starting first and then asking all the questions, and then you know what I mean. Yeah, it's the same as at a networking event, people controlling their projection of who they are. So what do you do? What's your name? Oh, great. And what about this, and this? Oh, great. Here's my business card. Off you go. And you don't ever actually have to deal with that feedback either by doing that. So I think it's, you've got to be at a crossroads where you're open to it, as well as probably open to it, seeking it, and then put yourself out there as well, right? You can put yourself out there and you just won't get it because people won't tell you, or you're not open to it. You say, fuck people's opinions,
Another question I thought to ask you is, what did those closest around you notice about you as you went through this?
Well, man, I mean, since I started the 100 Coffees, like I had just had my life obliterated. Like, not only did I go through the breakup, and then dealing with not having access to. I will say that again. Dealing with not seeing my son full time, because I did still have access to him. He was only 3 months at the time. I just broken my femur, my right femur.
Wow.
So it was like honestly, life just came and wanted to crush me for a little bit.
Yeah.
To humble me, and so it has been a big journey the last 18 months of my life, and a lot of that was really finding myself again and who I am, and connecting with that, and a lot of that has involved my work with psychedelic medicine and things like that I've used, which is MDMA, psilocybin, mescaline, DMT, 5-MeO DMT, all different sorts.
Yeah.
So I think I got a message from one of my best friends, Morgan, who I grew up with. He's, my oldest friend. I've known him since I was 10. Got a message from him on Christmas or around New Year, and he said something along the lines of, this year's been a huge year of growth for you. You were always enough. You were always loved and accepted as you are, but for you to consciously realize that, and be living from that place is a whole different thing. Congratulations on a great year or something like that. So to answer your question,
did that bring a tear to the eye?
Yeah, it did, for sure. That sort of thing actually means the most to me. Talking about Christmas and giving, it's those sort of heartfelt interactions that really are the biggest gift for me. So yeah, that's what people around me closest have said to me. But there isn't actually a lot of people like him in my life that I've known for a long period of time. I've got a lot of friends that I've known for kind of a couple of years now.
Yes.
But that's because at the start of the 100 Coffees, I was making a conscious decision to...
It's almost like blank slate.
It was, a lot of my friends, now my closest friends, I've only known since, say, July last year, July 2019, and I started the 100 Coffees in October. So it was kind of a real big shift for me in my life at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing that brought up is that we can often go on this journey of when we do have the call to find more about ourselves. There's often a big part which is I've got to go within to find out who I am, and psychedelics are a great instrument for that because they'll take you to a place, and there's the walking on the beach by yourself and the journaling and all of those great stuff. But again, you end up being an island of one.
Yeah.
I think the great thing about what you've done is you've done that work, but also this work but I am also a person that sits in amongst a sea of many. I'm not just an island of one, a sea of many, and I'm going to go out and swim in that and then see what that has to do.
Yeah, I think so.
Makes it more balanced.
Well, I think you have to have a combination of both, because especially for someone whose pattern has been to alienate themselves, and reinforce in my own mind that what I'm doing is good and okay. But I think it comes down to, well, what do I want in my life? And that is the first question I start with. And for me, it was, I want to have more friends. I want to have a loving relationship where it's not toxic and I'm not toxic in it.
Yes.
I want to experience all of these things. I want to be a great friend to other people.
Yeah.
And so that caused me to have to get feedback from other people.
Yeah.
Because other people are the only measure of that.
They are, aren't they?
And then there's still a game of you've got to choose who you're getting feedback from and understand their perception and the place that
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
giving it from, and sort of mesh it in with your own understanding of yourself and whether you fully take it on. Because if you did one or the other completely, which is, you know, you're just living by other people's feedback and opinions,
Yes.
you become someone who is not you.
Yes.
So,
But there are those days when certain feedback turns up. I don't know if you find this, certain feedback turns up and it's almost like someone's taken the cleanest, sharpest knife and just gone zoom, straight in here, and you're like, oh, that's so me and that's so painful to take on board. And I've got to just sit with that for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I had that yesterday. Yeah, you know, when someone delivers words that resonate so deeply with your mind and your soul that you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah. It's actually quite a skill to take on board feedback. It's so easy to be defensive and you know, deny or nullify or debase other people's, you know, well, was he know he's a dick? You know, look at the colour of his shoes. And it's like, what? Fucking what?
Yeah.
You know, or, you know, discredit somebody so you don't have to listen to what they say. There's always a grain of truth in there somewhere, even if you really discredit the person.
Yeah. I think the key is, you know, if you're open to feedback and you want it, is to set up the environment in such a way that people feel comfortable giving it as well. Because as you said, most people won't give it because they are worried about what your response is going to be. And this thing that I learned in a, not that I've used this recently, but this thing I learned in like a personal development workshop I did was we had to go away and do these feedback interviews with our, say, 3 closest friends or family. And we had to set the interview up by saying, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I'd really love for you to answer honestly and truthfully. And all I will do and can do is to say thank you.
Right. Cool.
So there is no response back.
Yeah.
And then the questions were something like, you know, what is one, how am I ineffective in our relationship? How am I effective in our relationship? You know, what is one thing that is holding me back from my own greatness? Sort of questions like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get really honest answers from people.
Yeah.
As to how they see it.
Superb.
Yeah.
Were there any other sort of unexpected benefits from doing this, where you look back now and go, that really surprised me?
Well, I started my own podcast in 2020 as a consequence of having so many interesting conversations.
Yes.
And it then made it really easy to get podcast guests to start with.
Yes.
Because I was basing it off these fascinating stories that I'd heard from people who I'd had coffee with.
Yes.
So that's one benefit. Another is, you know, I actually made about 150 grand on a deal I did with someone I had coffee with.
Right.
So that was a property developer, and I actually known of this person from years ago when I was doing real estate in Karratha.
Yeah.
And like we'd emailed, you know, back then a couple of times.
Yeah.
And so I actually reached out to him to have coffee with, and we did, and this opportunity had just come up at the time, and I just talked to him about it and brought them in on it. They helped me execute it, and then managed to make some money off it. So
it's just tidy.
Yeah.
Paid for the party at the end.
Well, exactly. Yeah. That and all the coffees, but so that was an unexpected benefit for sure. And I think getting the opportunity to do things like this, you know, I really value these types of conversations and being able to share my experiences. This is really fun for me. So this wouldn't have come, you know, had it not been for the 100 coffees. And I think I've been on, you know, maybe 2 or 3 podcasts now as a consequence of that. Yeah. Beyond the tangible, the other intangible stuff has been, like I have so many more friends now.
Yes.
You know, I was at a New Year's Day event and see 2 guys I had coffee with who like we're now really good friends,
Yeah.
and I'm invited to their birthday party, and you know, that's awesome. Like it is enriched my life in an intangible way that I could not have thought that was going to be how it was before. You know, and I never really understood the thing of like Perth small. I never understood it before because I was never connected enough.
Yes.
And I really understand it now.
Yes.
Because, you know, most people I know someone else I know, and vice versa. And through the 100 Coffees journey, I was also able to connect people I'd had coffee with who, two people have are doing business together, which is looking really successful.
Lovely when you can do that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I mean, so many things. Yeah, it really underpinned, I think, the theme of 2020 for me.
Yeah.
And how that year went. Yeah.
Yeah. Strikes me that at a time when people were getting more and more isolated, you went to the other extreme of meeting more and more people.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get stuck in your own echo chamber.
Yeah. I often wonder, you know, what, like we're saying that, what am I going to look back on in a year's time and at now, and maybe listen to this in a year's time and go, fuck, I did not know what I was talking about then.
Oh yeah.
You know, like what is that right now for me?
Yeah.
I often wonder that because you can't see it until you see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's two parts to that, I find. One is, what is it that's about to emerge for me, which will mean that the hindsight. Well, what is it that's about to emerge for me that will make me look at this and go, oh, God, in 6 to 12 months' time? Mm-hmm. But also, there's the retrospective part of, you know, if we went back 10 years, like I can think of something that was so important to me that I now look at it and go, oh, right. And if I went back 8 years, I could get something, and 6 years, and 4 years, and 2 years. So we know that things that are important to us, or ways of thinking about the world, or sense making and perspective, were probably really important at that point, but we know that they were wrong. But if you took an audit right at this moment of everything you know about the world, you wouldn't be able to pick out which is the next one to be proved to be wrong. Do you know what I mean? So to me, there's almost like two bits. There's going to be stuff that's going to come in, and there's stuff that's going to go out. And you don't know what's going to go out. But what I do know is right now, all of them are important, and all of them are right.
Yeah.
Or not. So you said you started a podcast. What is the focus of that now? Is that a continuation, or is that a bit more of a focus on things?
Yeah, when I started it, I was, you know, maybe going to call it 100 Coffees, maybe going to call it something else.
Yeah.
And I just landed on the Alex Waters show.
It's got a nice ring to it.
Yeah, does it? So, you know, I think the intention originally was to just have interesting conversations with interesting people. And as a process of sort of going through that, I got comfortable with starting to talk more and more about things that maybe I'd felt were a bit taboo before, which a big one is psychedelics.
Yep.
It's probably one of my biggest passions. And so the direction of it now is heading more towards that, and, you know, its place in sort of human evolution and expanding our human experience. And I think the rest of it is more focused on conversations that share interesting aspects of the human experience and unlocking human potential.
Yes.
So for me right now, I'm getting really obsessed about my health and how I can stay young and live longer, that kind of theme, and get the most out of my brain and my energy. And so I'm sure I'll be sharing stuff on that as well.
Superb.
And getting experts in, because I'm not an expert.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of having a podcast.
Yeah.
Tap in. You stick your straw in someone else's soup and suck it out for a while.
Yeah.
Do you think that on one level, a majority of us should do more of getting out and meeting strangers? If you take
Yeah, absolutely. I've said that a couple of times to people who are like, oh, I want to do 100 coffees, but I can't because it's your thing. And I'm like, it actually wasn't my thing. I stole, like, I took it from someone else. So I think everyone should do something like that.
Yeah.
And
even if it's 20 coffees.
Yeah, exactly. 20, because that would be, one every fortnight for a year or something like that.
There you go.
Yeah, so 100 was on average 2 a week for a year, which isn't, it's not substantial. I think anything that, I think most people don't do enough, including myself, of committing to things which consistently put them outside their comfort zone.
Yes.
And the paradox with that, I think, is because we first need to think outside of our comfort zone in order to get outside of it.
Yes.
So,
well, you've got to go and find the edges, don't you?
That's right. So it's, you've almost got to put your thinking into the unknown a little bit to kind of come up with these things. But even just starting with anything, really. So for me this year, it's more around challenging my mind and body. I'd like to run a marathon. I've never done anything like that before.
Yeah.
I think the knock on. Let me start that sentence again. When I was doing this, a lot of people would ask me why, and were surprised at my why, which was I just want to meet more people and connect with them. It's like, oh, but it's so you can, do something after that, isn't it? Or are you going to do something with this later?
Yeah. They want a bigger, more strategic, focused answer.
Yeah.
They want you to go, I'm going to do A because then I'll get to B.
Exactly.
You can define what B is.
Yeah. And so one of the biggest things I took out of the challenge was I had been my entire life focusing on an outcome or getting a result. And the greatest result came when I let go of that, because there was so much intangible that happened. I was open to that. And, I think if we can do more things just because.
Yeah. And that's the end of the sentence?
Yeah. And just because it's important to us, like, connecting with people was important to me. I think that is the beautiful experience that you can't tangibly quantify or put words to.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah.
And that's probably similar to why people ask me, how much money do you make from doing the podcast?
Yeah.
I'm like, nothing.
Yeah.
But I am a very wealthy man because of it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Are there any other things about the experience that you'd like to share?
I just had fun. I just had so much fun doing it. And, it was probably the first time in my life that I'd committed to something like that and executed on it. Like that wasn't making me any money. In fact, it was costing me money because I was spending money on coffee. I think you might have bought ours. I don't know. Or you maybe offered to. It just it really brought hard home for me that nothing means anything without people and without connection. That I can go and start a business and make money from it, or I can go and do this thing, but without the connection and the interaction with other people, it really, it loses a bit of meaning. Because the things that we're all aspiring to at the end of the day, in terms of things, without other people, they are meaningless.
They are.
Like, you can have a big house, but if you're in it by yourself, what's the fucking point?
Exactly.
All of that kind of stuff. You can go and you can have as much money as you want, so you can do whatever you want, but if you've got no one to do it with,
Yeah.
once again,
Well, to share it with, or
you're going to be somewhat lonely. And so it really, I think one of the best things about doing something like this is that it was repetition, and it's helped me recondition and rewire my brain to think differently. And so, now I can start to think about things more easily around, well, less about the outcome or the things that I'm trying to get, and more about the journey and the right now and what's important right now.
being present.
Exactly. Yeah. Taught me that I was a really shit listener. It taught me so many things like that. Yeah. Because it's it's rare that you sit there and just listen to someone for a long period of time. And I would notice myself at times drifting off or thinking about things, or they would say something that would prompt a thought, and then I'd come back 5 seconds later and I realized I just missed a part of what they said.
Yeah.
It happened once in this conversation already.
Yeah. And it's human.
It is human, but I think the more we notice those things, the more we can kind of improve and just really be present. And that whole premise of needing to say something next is to fill the gap, and there's actually nothing wrong with the gap.
No.
So yeah.
So the last question I always ask my guest is, if you could upload one question into the collective consciousness, so everybody just sat down for 5 or 10 minutes and pondered it, what would it be?
Why am I here? Yeah. And the reason why that question is because I think if you start to question that, that question has different layers and levels to it. So it's, why am I here right now in this house doing this thing? Why am I here in my life? And then there's kind of the existential part of that, which is why am I here? And it gets people to contemplate life and death. And I think contemplating death has been a really healthy part of my growth and journey. Understanding that it could end at any moment, it could end tomorrow, and that even if I get everything that I ever desire, it's also still then going to end.
Yes.
I think that question adds a lot of meaning, or it adds a certain sadness to life. But that is also a reality.
Yeah.
And it also has made me far more present and patient, and gets me to refocus on what's important.
Super.
Yeah.
Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you.
It's been very nourishing, because I feel like I'm speaking to somebody else who understands the importance of just talking to people for the sake of talking to people.
Yeah.
And then seeing where it goes. And as you pointed out, we become so outcome, output, what's the target, what's the goal, focused. Which is kind of funny because, more often than not, the goal is to be something different to which I can perceive right now. And so how can I tell you what the goal is going to be? Which is why I think a lot of coaching falls on its head at the start, but that's another conversation.
Yeah.
But it's been awesome. So if people want to reach out and find you,
best place is on Instagram.
Yeah.
At Alexander Waters. That's it.
And obviously the Alex Waters Show.
Yeah, the Alex Waters Show.
All the platforms.
Yes, on Spotify, Apple, wherever else. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.